The purpose of this video is to discuss the possibility of the United States returning to the gold standard. As you may know, the US dollar is a fiat currency. The dollar is not backed by anything other than faith and perhaps the US military, but it doesn't have any intrinsic backing. Prior to 1971, it was actually backed by gold, and for a time you could exchange your dollars for gold coins. Can we ever go back to a system like that, where we don't see massive inflation and the government doesn't spend recklessly? They are actually held accountable for their actions. Are there any realistic chances of this happening? Well, let's take a look and see. First off, why would we want to go back to the gold standard? Well, less inflation would be one of the many reasons, and currently with the system we have, the Fed can create an infinite amount of currency for stimulus checks, bailouts, and new government programs. And by doing so, it can simply expand the currency supply indefinitely, which is going to cause a great deal of inflation. In contrast, if we were on a gold standard, they would only be able to increase the currency supply by getting more gold. As a result, inflation would be much more difficult to occur. If you don't know, inflation is basically a tax that we all have to pay. Therefore, if dollars get inflated, things become more expensive for everyone holding them. As it is a hidden tax, it would basically eliminate this tax. I think we can all agree less inflation is certainly a good thing, and most of us want that. Now, if we look at some of the inflation that we have seen over the last few decades, it's pretty dramatic. I mean, take a look at healthcare or college tuition. Now, is there any government officials pushing for a gold standard? And what are the chances of one actually happening? Well, a while back, I saw an article that was in regards to a new bill that was being introduced to possibly bring back the U.S. gold standard. The Gold Standard Restoration Act was introduced by Alex Mooney. It would prevent Washington's irresponsible spending habits and the creation of money from thin air. Now, Representative Mooney explains why this would be beneficial in a statement. The gold standard is not popular down here, according to Fed Jerome Powell. According to him, monetary policy can stabilize the dollar price of gold if you assign us to do so, but other things would fluctuate. According to Powell, every other country in the world has abandoned the gold standard because of this. It was said decades ago that reintroducing a gold standard would create substantial economic problems because there is no political will for it. With a gold standard, we would be forced into a permanently deflationary credit environment. So some people think a restrictive credit deflationary environment is a bad thing. But if we saw deflation, then you could save dollars because in the future you could buy more goods. Thus, people would be encouraged to use the dollar more and save more. So this isn't the worst thing I can think of, and Peter Schiff had this one on his blog, which I was reading. And is it possible to return to a gold standard? And I, of course, won't read the whole entire thing, but there are a few bits and pieces that I would like to go over. And it starts with governments will not impose a new gold standard, he believes. The free market will reject the dollar and other currencies because they are no longer a store of value and are a flawed form of money. And it's true, you can't save in dollars because you lose purchasing power every year. It won't be a government that says, hey, we should go back to the gold standard. Here it will be the people who say that. A gold standard is probably not something that the United States would want to adopt. As a matter of fact, the United States would have to carry out many reforms if it went back on a gold standard. Perhaps welfare would have to be abandoned by the federal government in order to balance its budget. and reforming state programs is not a popular idea with most voters. Politicians under pressure from voters and special interest groups are hesitant to pass favors. As a result, monetary reform is hampered by ideological opposition. If this basic obstacle could be overcome, however, a return to gold money would become a realistic possibility. Therefore, I don't think the US will return to the gold standard. Gold standards are unpopular among politicians because they would require the government to balance its budget. It's unlikely they'll ever do that. Basically, they're going to continue to spend until the dollar is hyperinflated away. And they've got daddy's credit card and they'll max it out an infinite amount of times. It's unlikely that we will see a gold standard in our lifetime unless there's, a major disaster such as the end of the US dollar, and, another world war, some type of chaos that forces us to return to gold. And, you never know. I mean, if you take a look at the war in Ukraine, between Russia and Ukraine, that war seems to intensify. And now if you look at China and Taiwan, it seems like China could perhaps invade Taiwan at any moment. So you never really know. Sadly, our politicians and governments are just addicted to this fiat currency, and they continue to keep it down on the road. And it has worked so far, so why not continue to inflate the dollar and make the problem for tomorrow? Well, the problem is for our children and our grandchildren. And what's in the point in continuing to do it until all the wheels fall off? Well, I think we're getting pretty close to the wheels falling off. And there will be a time when the wheels do in fact come off. And there's no way that we can continue to do this indefinitely. And eventually, I think the United States and the world could return to a gold standard. But I do not see the United States going back to the gold standard anytime in the near future. Now, purchasing and holding physical gold is what I'm doing. I continue to stack because I have no faith in this inflated, dying fiat currency. And dollars, of course, could reach zero. So to me, it doesn't matter if the dollar does die off. I store my wealth outside of the system. And I appreciate you watching the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.